Hello and good evening to everyone. Welcome to our other class. Today we're going to proceed with another topic. So if you're not in the previous class, I recommend you to look for the previous videos where we discussed SQL injection as well as process XSS attack. So today we're going to look at sandboxing. Today's class will not be too long like that of previous. It's going to be just a single topic. So I request all of us to be attentive until the end of the class because we'll take attendance at the end of the class. I see Doctor is around. Doctor can give us a preamble, a simple introduction, and then we'll start the business, sir. Dr. Drake.
Okay, good evening, colleagues. Thank you, Mohindo, for this finding time to share with us. So today we will talk about social security, and he will talk about to sandboxing, and so they bring you the practical experience from the industry. So I don't have to waste time. I think we lost about 10 minutes. So Mohindo, you can take us through. I'll be following. I'm on the kind of the road, but I'll be following in here and there. So over to you, sir.
Wanange ndi mchibina aja kunsindikira bafana ndi musomesa.
Mohindo, you can
Yes,
take
sir.
on.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I was speaking just a call. Okay. So today we're going to look at sandboxing, as Dr. Drake has said. And I request everyone to be attentive because these are real world issues that we're talking about when you're going to start after graduating and you start making more real world applications. You'll find what you're talking about today is really important. So I request everyone to be attentive, and the lecture is not going to be too long. So let's all be attentive at the end of the lecture, and I will take attendance at the end of the lecture. So let's begin the business. We're going to look at sandboxing, and I will share the slides or the presentations after the class. So look at what is meant by sandboxing. Then we'll look at the importance of sandboxes. Then we'll look at sandbox implementation, examples of sandbox applications, and maybe some more examples or real-world examples of sandboxing. So let's begin with the definition of sandboxing. We will not define it exactly as it is in the dictionary, but you're going to get to the meaning of what is meant by sandboxing. So from there, we'll try to explain and see how we can understand it, not exactly as it is in the dictionary, but understanding what's meant or the meaning of what? Of sandboxing. So here is the definition of sandboxing. A sandbox is an isolated testing environment that enables users to run programs or open files without affecting the application, system, or platform on which they run. So I'll come again. Sandbox means a sandbox is an isolated testing environment. So as you have said, it is a testing environment that enables users to run programs. Just a minute, someone is calling me. Hello, Papa. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Niko mklasi, niko nasomesa. Nitakupigia baadaye. So I was saying, is as we've heard, as we have read, it is an isolated testing environment that we use to run programs or open files without affecting the real application or a system or a platform on which they run. So that's what is meant by what? By sandboxing. So it is nothing but an environment that we use to test a what? A real system. So software developers use sandboxes to test new programming code. So after creating a project or you've created a program, so before you deploy it, you'll need to test it. So to test it, instead of testing it with real data or the system that's already existing, what we do, we always create an environment that we use for development or for testing. So that environment that we use for testing before we deploy the code, or before we deploy what we have improved or what we have created in the real world or in the existing system that is running or the production system, that environment is what we call sandbox. So it helps us not to do what? Not to mess up with the live environment or production environment or production application or system or whatever it is. And we try everything that we can possibly do with the software. And then after, we can deploy that source code into what? Into the real production environment. So in other words, here we can summarize it by saying, sandboxing, it helps developers to test the programs of the codes, the programming code before we deploy it to do what? To do a live server or a live system that is in production. So cyber security professionals use sandboxing to test potentially malicious software. So assume that you're having a company that is having a that uses third-party softwares. So before you deploy these softwares into the production systems that are running for the company, what we do, we first test those softwares into sandbox platforms. And once we are sure that they are really functioning and they are not going to mess up with code, they're not going to mess up with existing data or existing system, then we go ahead and deploy them into the production system. So without sandboxing, software or applications could have potentially unlimited access to all user data, system resources, or network. So, when you're developing a software, before you test it, of course, you always have almost access to everything. So instead of you deploying that software that you're not sure of whether it is your own source code or it is a source code from another developer or from other third-party company, so before you deploy it, instead of you deploying it straight to the production system, it is better to use Sandbox and first test it separately. And after testing it is separately and make sure it works properly, then we go ahead and do it and deploy it into a real production. So without sandboxing a software or an application, the problem may be that application or software or your own source code can have access to all the user data, or user roles or the data. So at the end of the day, you may end up messing up the real production system or the real data because of what? Because of a project that you have not done that you have not tested separately, and you put it straight to the mobile app, to the application that is under production. So sandboxes are also used to safely execute malicious code to avoid harming the host device. It can be the network or other connected devices. So likewise to the networking, we also have sandboxes. So before we deploy the sandbox code or a software, what we do, we first put it to the sandbox network or to the network that you can use just only for testing. And once we make sure that everything is okay and it is not creating any harm, then you go ahead and deploy that software or source code into the production environment. As I said, that this source code can either be your own source code or third-party source code. So you may say that you may not be having bad intentions to your own application. So maybe you may need to deploy it directly. But remember, you're a human being, so you can have errors. So those errors, if you just put straight into deployment or into production environment, at the end of the day, you can become a problem to yourself, and you end up messing up with your data into production. So the better solution is to use a sandbox or an isolated environment for testing or thoroughly testing anything, whether it is on network or on a real system. You first test it thoroughly on a sandbox and just make sure it's working perfectly. Then you go ahead and do and deploy it on the production environment. So using a sandbox to detect malware offers an additional layer of protection against security threats, such as stealthy attacks and exploits that use zero-day vulnerability. So zero-day is the first deployment of what? Of application, so or a software. So before you set up a software, it will always have that term called zero-day vulnerability. The very first time when you're setting up, so that software can exploit your production environment, either to steal your data before you set it up or before you set its limit, or to exploit your the user rights that you have on your own application. So Sandbox will help to detect if a malware has that zero-day vulnerability. So as malware becomes more sophisticated, sandboxing protects an organization's critical infrastructure from suspicious code because it runs on a separate system. And I think this is self-explanatory. So assume that you're having servers and you have purchased one more software. So before you deploy this software into the servers that are running, what you do, it's better to first deploy it on the sandbox. So in case that software or piece of code is having malicious intentions or malicious code that can distort the data, what it does, you will only detect that one while that software is still on Sandbox. And by the time you deploy it on the production environment or the real server of the company or the organization, you have already tested and see whether it is really safe or not. So don't trust every software. At individual level, you may be like it is okay with you, because before you go profession, any software that you land on, you just put it straight to your machine, and before you're testing whether it is having malicious code or malicious intentions, you just put it straight to your machine, that individual level. But when you start dealing with companies organizations that are having sophisticated data, you better first to put it on a sandbox machine, and then after making sure that it is safe and good to be deployed on the server, you go ahead and deploy it on the server. So it also allows it also allows to test malicious code in an isolated testing environment to understand how it works, as well as more rapidly detect similar malware attacks. And this one, I think, is also self-explanatory. Sandboxing also help us to detect malware attacks before this malware attack. Before this malware affect our system into the production. So as malware becomes more sophisticated, monitoring suspicious behavior to detect malware has become increasingly difficult. Many threats in recent years have employed advanced obfuscation techniques that can evade detection from endpoint and network security products. In general, Sandbox is used to test suspicious programs that contain viruses or other malware without allowing the software to harm the host devices. So all what we've been trying to explain from the beginning of the presentation has been summarized here, or we've summarized it here, which is a sandbox is just a testing environment that we use to test suspicious programs. It may not even be suspicious, or any kind of program that we use to test suspicious program that may contain viruses or malware without allowing the software to harm the application or software into that is into production. And we have said this software can be your own software that you've developed by yourself, or it can be a software from an external developer. So what you do, you have to first pass it through through the sandbox, or this through the sandbox or this independent or standalone testing environment, and what to make sure it is performing properly, it is having no malware, it is having no risk codes, it is having no dangerous pieces of code that can mess up your data. Then you go ahead and deploy it into the what? Into the host or the live production system. So let us look at sandbox implementation. Sandboxing is an important feature of the Java programming language and development environment, where sandbox is a program area and set to rules that programmers need to use when creating what? Creating Java code called an applet. That is sent as part of what? Of a web page. So in Java, when you're creating Java application, we have what you call applets. These applets, they are kind of a mirror or kind of how should I call it? It is a kind of a clone of a real application that is running on the server. So what we do first is everything on an applet, and to make sure that it is performing properly. We go ahead and do what and deploy it on the live server. That is according to Java. Then if you're a PHP programmer, we have what you call XAMPP and MAMP and LAMP, those ones, the one that we deploy on localhost. So you first deploy everything on local. So a localhost can act as your what? As your sandbox if you're a PHP developer. And I believe most of people here, they have tried PHP. So you'll do everything on localhost. So localhost will act as your what? As your sandbox. So once you make sure that everything on localhost is working perfectly, then you go ahead and deploy it on what? On a what? On a real server, or what we call the cPanel, or something that is already on what? Online. So for the Java, they use what we call applets. For PHP developers, we use what we call localhost or local environment. So you can have a copy of the data that is live on your database or in production environment on your localhost. And then when you're about to deploy a certain piece of code, you first implement it on your localhost and you see where this code is not going to mess up with your data. If it does, then you have to fix everything. And once you make sure that everything is working perfectly on localhost, for those who are using PHP. For those who are using Java, what to make sure that everything is working okay on applets, then you go ahead and deploy it on what? On the online server or the production server. So that is how we implement sandboxing in what? In Java and what? And PHP. So a sandbox can also enable a mirrored production environment that an external developer can use to develop an application that uses a web service from the sandbox. This enables third-party developers to validate their code before migrating it into the what? Into production environment. As we proceed, I'll show you what we're trying to talk about here. We are saying, just a minute, guys. Hello, Mr. Samuel.
Yes, Mr. Mwendo, how are you?
I'm okay. If you could please call me like after 30 minutes. Right now I'm in class.
Okay, no problem.
Yes, sir. I was saying that assume that you've made a software that is going to be used by many people. I hope you members, you're following. You may not get the whole concept at the beginning, but by the time you complete, if you're really following, you'll have understood everything. And as I told you at the beginning, like when we set exams, we don't set for you to write exactly what we put in the slides, but we set in the exam in a way that we trigger your brain to show that you understood things. It may not be exact definitions or exact points as they are here. Just what we care about is, did you really understand the concepts? So if you pay attention, even though you may not get the whole definitions as how they are here, you'll find these informations are important to you in the exam or even real world. So try to be attentive. After all, the lecture is not going to be too long. So be attentive that you should understand, and then you should have something to write in the exam. So we are saying here, when we create applications that are going to be used by many people, Let us say that you're creating maybe an API that is going to be public. Maybe it can be in, for example, an API for maybe you're creating maybe a bank application. Maybe you're creating maybe a news application that people are going to be subscribing to these APIs and then they use it. How comes? Okay. So, and then they use it. What we do, we create an environment that is independent or that is separate from what? From the real production code. And this environment, we provide it to developers to use it to play with the system or to play with it with something that looks exactly like a what? Like the system. Then after they play with it, and maybe if it's for development, after they have finished developing and everything is okay, then they go ahead and do what? And deploy it into the what? Into the production environment. If you've ever programmed using Facebook APIs, you can tell what I'm talking about right now. When you're developing Facebook API, using Facebook APIs, what they do, they first create for you a sandbox. So you are free to make as many errors as you want. And once everything works perfectly, you can now start doing what? Deploying it into the production environment. So likewise, if you didn't have this idea of creating a sandbox, start getting it from today. Like if you create a system or a software that is going to be used by many people, it is better for you to create another copy or to put in provision a copy that is going to be totally separate from the production copy. And this copy should be exactly like the one in production. But this copy that is separate for testing, what we call sandboxing, it should be used just only to test. So you give people ability to create errors, to test what they can do and everything. So once they are good and they are good to go, then they can start deploying all their pieces of code into what? Into real world. I'm going to demonstrate to you and I show you how Sandbox is being used in real world using different applications. I think we'll use, there is one software is called Africa's Talking. It's a software for messages and call centers. We will use that one and I show you how they deploy their sandboxes. I will use also another software. Okay, I'll also show you another software and I'll show you how they are using what? A sandbox. So if you didn't have idea of sandbox, so start getting it today. Start getting it today. When you're going to create either an application that's going to be used by many people or an application that is sophisticated, better create a what? An environment that is looking like an application that is in production, but that environment will be used only for what? For deployment and testing. And then that once an application passes that level of testing through the environment that is independent, you can go ahead and deploy it into what? Into the real world. So I'm going to demonstrate that. I think, I'm going to demonstrate it. I see our Zoom is counting down. I don't know, maybe the thing has expired. So we'll join again when the Zoom ends. Okay, we'll join again to finish the lecture. So an API sandbox is targeted at developers and testers. It mimics the characteristics of production environment to create simulated responses for the API, reflect the behavior of the what? Of the real system. I hope this is also straightforward. Just like I said, your sandbox or the sandbox that you'll create maybe for your future application, it should be exactly like a what? Like a real application into production, so that the data will not, the data into production will not be messed with, but whatever a developer who depends on your application or your API is developing using your sandbox, it should reflect exactly what is in the what? In the real production environment. So examples of sandboxes can be isolated code. So here are the examples of sandboxes. It can be an isolated code execution in almost situation that software code executes. So you can look at sandboxes in different ways. Assume that you're having your application that is into production. So even though this application you're not making it for other developers to depend on, as I said, it can be your own even application. What you do, you create a separate environment. So if this application is into production, what you do, you first create a separate environment and test everything. But this environment should look exactly like the one in production. Okay? So you first test everything on that code. And remember, and here another thing that we are committing on is if the production environment is running a certain specific operating system, then also this one into the sandboxing, it should be also running on what? On that particular operating system. For example, if your environment is running a specific database, likewise, the one that you're testing on, the one that is either on localhost or wherever you're testing from, you should also have the same specific database, the same specific configuration. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you may end up thinking that things work okay from the environment that you're testing on, but when you deploy them to the real production where your system is, they end up doing what? Not working as how they're supposed to. So what you do, you have to make sure that the configuration of the system that you're using to testing, they are exactly like those ones of the system that is under deployment. So we say some specific examples using a sandbox to isolate code execution. So another example is to isolate a code execution. So wherever you're executing the code, just make sure that code cannot affect or has no any effect on the system that is under what? Under production. So examples of sandboxes, we have web browsers. Okay, a trusted web browsers can run inside a sandbox. Then if a website exploits vulnerability in that web browser, the damage is limited to the what? To the sandbox, and it minimizes, and it is what? It is minimized. So for web applications, what you do, you can allocate it to what? To a specific web browser. So if that application is having a specific dangerous feature or malicious code, what you'll do, it will only affect the what? A web browser without affecting the whole system that is under the production. So software protection, there are tools that enable users to run software that we don't trust. So software that can't access their private data or harm their devices. Because the sandbox appear to be a complete system to the software. So the software usually can't detect that if it's constrained to the what? To the virtual environment. So to explain this, as I say that a sandbox is supposed not to is not supposed to do what? To affect anything on the what? On the system that is under deployment. Assume that you're using a system, or you're using the whole operating system, and you want to test a software. And remember, maybe you may be having only one computer, but you want to test a particular software. So what do? So let us join in the next meeting using the same link. This one is going to close, and then in that one, in that last session, it is where we are going to demonstrate the real world examples of sandbox. This one is closing right now. So guys, join using the same meeting, the same link. It is where we're going to now do the real world examples of sandbox. Okay? So this one is ending right now, within a minute. Join using the same link. So I hope I'm straight. I hope you've had. Join using the same what? Using the same link. same link in Akola. Okay, we'll wait for a few minutes as our friends are joining, and then okay. Let us wait for 1 more minute. Okay, welcome back to our last session. We were saying that in case you have one computer and you want to test a software, so we have some softwares that we can use for testing a certain software without affecting our environment. For example, we have what we call virtual environments. We have a operating system like VirtualBox. So this VirtualBox, you can install it on your own operating system, and then that VirtualBox, you can use it to test a certain software. And in case that software is having an issue, or is having a code, or is having a malicious thing that can affect your operating system, what it does, it will affect only the virtual environment, but will not affect your system. So if it is the company, it's the computer's company. I mean, they're computers for the company. So what you do, you may first test the software, and you've purchased maybe a software for a company or organization that you're working for, and you want to test it. So instead of testing it on direct to the company's computer, what you do, you first, and you have maybe limited resources, what you do, you first install a virtual environment, and then you install that software to virtual environment. As we've said, that you have things like VirtualBox, VMbox, something like that. Virtual machine. It's called, is it called what? VirtualBox or what? I think it's called VirtualBox for Windows. VirtualBox for Windows. Okay, this one. So you can use this VM to test a software. This VM virtual machine. I don't know. They're called virtual machine. I don't know. Whatever. So you can use this software to test a certain software on this operating system. If before you deploy it on the exact operating system. So how this one works, it creates another operating system within your operating system. So if it's a software, you first test it on that virtual environment or VirtualBox. So if it does not have effect, or it does not have, or it has passed the test software, I mean the test, the test that you wanted, what you do, then you go ahead and deploy it on the real organization's machines. For Windows, we're having that virtual machine, that VirtualBox, and if you're using Mac, we have one called parallel. It's called parallel. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's called parallels. These parallels, what it will do, it can install another operating system on on your machine. Okay. So once those are another operating system on your machine, then you can go ahead and test that software on that parallels. So if it does not have an effect on your parallels operating system, you can go ahead and deploy it into the real operating system that you're having for your either organization or your company, or that you're having for personal or professional works. So this is called Parallels for Mac operating system, and those who are using Windows, you can also install an operating system called a VirtualBox, and this VirtualBox will create a virtual environment. So in case that software has a malicious effect on operating system, what it will do, it will only affect the virtual environment. It will not affect the real environment that you're using, either for the company or for the organization. So before we go back to the slides, let me show you, or let me demonstrate to you softwares that are using sandboxes in real world. So I told you there is one called Africa is Talking. There are so many. Even Facebook is having Sandbox. So many softwares, even Google, and as long as you have to use their API. So what they do, they first create for you a sandbox environment, and then after developing your application through the sandbox and it has gone through all the requirements, then you go ahead and deploy it into the real world. So this Africa's Talking is a company that is used to that provides services like SMS, USSD codes. USSD services. These one where you press star one, whatever, and then you can use those to maybe USSD. Then it also has the voice or the calls, or it also has the airtime. You can buy and sell airtime using this system, and also have payments API. So that is a system that you may, in case you want to use maybe SMS, you want to integrate SMS with your application, you can use this Africa's Talking. Okay, so this one, they have what you call Sandbox. So before you deploy your API, what you do, you first test everything into a sandbox. Also, another thing that I've remembered is MTN mobile money API. Okay, so this MTN mobile money API, if you want to develop your system and want to deploy it into MTN mobile money API, you want to deploy to implement this mobile money API into your application. Okay, so what you do, you have to first create an account here, and then after creating an account, before you deploy your code, what they do, they first provide you a sandbox environment, as you can see here, sandbox for the API. So this sandbox, what it will do, it will look, or it will perform much more like a real world system, or the system that you're going to deploy. But here, the transactions that you'll be making in the sandbox, they will not be real transactions. They'll be just for for testing. For example, you can initialize transfer of money from one person to another, but this one will only remain. It will only remain into the sandbox, but you can at least confirm that yes, it has worked or not. So instead of you initializing these multiple tests, multiple queries, and play with it, so instead of you doing that in a live environment, what they do, they first provide you a sandbox environment. So you play with it until everything is okay and your API is really functioning. Then you go ahead and deploy it. You go ahead and deploy it into a real world environment. So in your free time, come here with MTN Mobile Money API. You can also start playing with your sandbox. Because playing with the sandbox is really free, you don't need any payment, you don't need anything. It's really, really free. And you can play with it, and maybe you can even learn along the way how you can implement mobile money API with your what? With your application. So that is the end-to-end sandbox. So after you finish doing everything here with end-to-end sandbox, then you can go ahead and deploy it into real world. So there's end-to-end sandbox. There is another sandbox for Facebook API. Facebook API sandbox. They also have a sandbox, so in case you want to use Facebook API into your applications. So what you do, you have to first play everything with what? With their sandbox. So once things are okay and they're working exactly as how you expected, then you go ahead and deploy them into what? Into the real world application. So that is how we can use sandbox there. So there is also this one is called, so I've shown you two. So in Ask You an Exam, at least you should be able to fidget around. Okay. So there's another one here. It's called for Africa is talking. This one is, as I told you, we use them for creating SMS, maybe USSD call, and then also voice. You can also use it for buying and selling airtime. Let me say that you're creating an application that you want to verify users using SMS. You can use this Africa is talking. You want to create an application where you can a user can call another user on free calls. You can as well use African talking. You want to implement airtime buying and selling in an application. You can use this Africa's talking, and so many things. So this Africa's talking, they also have what you call a sandbox. So if I log in here and I want maybe to deploy, I want to integrate SMS. I don't know whether you've ever tried to create an account on a certain thing and then they first send you an SMS to verify. So you may wonder, like, how is it done? So you can use such a system to do that. So before you deploy it into real world or before you implement it real world, what they do, they first provide you a sandbox. Let me log in here and I show you how their sandbox look like. Why is it not logging? I think I need to refresh first. Okay, so they also have a what? A sandbox. Okay, here I am. So you see, so if I want to create, maybe I want to create a call center, I want to create SMSs and integrate them into my application. I want to create a system that a person can use to buy and sell airtime. So what I do, I can come here to Africa is talking, and the first thing to do, I can go here to Sandbox. So this here Sandbox, they'll give me the username and password that I can use just for playing with. So here maybe you can follow their documentation, and then they'll show you how you can send airtime from one person to the other. Then you deploy that into your source code. So what the airtime that they will send, it will not be real airtime. It will be a fake airtime, but it will have learned that, hey, this is how I can send airtime from one person to the other, and will have tested and seen that it really works. So this is their sandbox. So in case you want to do SMS, so you want to implement maybe the SMS outbox. So this is how their sandbox will look like. And their documentation, because I have not created some instances, their documentation is also there. I don't open the documentation. Okay. So, but otherwise, this is a sandbox how to look like. Otherwise, if for example, I send an SMS and that SMS has gone to another person, so my inbox, it will look like this. But this is not the environment that is under deployment. It is just a sandbox just for testing. So it means that this one, I can use this environment to play with and make sure that everything is okay. So after making sure that everything is okay, I now want to deploy my things that to go to the real world. So what it does, I will have to maybe pay. So if they need payment. So after I pay, it means that now my real world application or my dashboard will look much more like this one. But whatever I'm seeing here, I accessed it for free and I did not pay. And whatever I'm doing here, it will just give me some dummy content that is going to look like how it will be in the real world, but it will not affecting anything in the system. So you see here, I've not paid, but I am able to see how their SMS section will look like. I am able to see how their voice will look like, the voice database. So I'm able to see that. You see, this is maybe how you can deploy the phone numbers and the what. This is how you can change the phone numbers, maybe for the callback and the rest. So it will look like this, and also the SSD. So this is the environment that I can use for deployment. And once things are okay, I can go ahead and now either go and purchase and then start deploying these things in what? In real world. So why do we learn these things? We learn these things because we want to know that they exist. And also we want to know that when we are creating our application, so instead of giving maybe people access direct to the environment that is working or that is paid for, and then they start messing up with things, writing codes that are breaking things, we should know that when you're creating an environment or a system, we should always have it in mind that we'll need a what? A sandbox. And this sandbox is just used to play with or when you're developing. So in case you break anything here, it will not mess up with something that is in the production or that is in the real world. It will mess up with only for testing, so you have not affected anything. So we should always have that in mind. So when you create a next application, always make sure that you will need to provide a what? A sandbox for that application. And the purpose of that sandbox, its purpose is just to do what? To play with. So in case anything is broken, it will not affect anything in real what? In real production environment. So that is Africa is talking dashboard for Sandbox, so you can play with this at anything. So here these guys, they have their documentation. Let me show you. The documentation is really straightforward. Let me show you. I'm already logged in, so I may not access it. Okay. In case you ever have an idea, if you don't have an idea, like you may want to maybe deploy SMS in your application, so you can start from here. So you see here we have a section of developers, and then you have the what? The documentation here. So you have to sit down and read the documentation in case you want to deploy this into your world. And what they will do, they'll provide for you the sandbox environment. And this sandbox environment, you will do anything but will not affect the production environment. As we said in the mobile money API, they also provide the sandbox. So I hope you're getting now the picture why we need sandboxes. In case you're creating an environment for developers or even the system for yourself, you may need a what? A sandbox. So this is their documentation. So in case you want to read the documentation for SMS, you click there. And then these guys, they'll show you how you can get started with SMS. They'll show you whether you're a developer for Python or PHP and the rest. So if you click on create, so they'll show you. This is a curl. And you know, a curl request is supported by almost every programming language apart from HTML and CSS. You can send a what? A request. So they'll show you how you can send a request to this HTTP. So you'll provide a phone number and maybe that where the SMS is going, and then maybe you'll provide a post where the SMS is going to, and then you do what? You send that to this endpoint. So when you do that, then if you're doing it under Sandbox, you'll be able to see that SMS has, yes, I'm recording and I'll share the video. And you'll be able to see that SMS has gone, but since it is under Sandbox, you'll not be able to tell that, that SMS will not be in the real world. So you can use this one to test and play with everything. So this is the documentation for SMSs, the documentation for USSD. I hope you know USSD. These things are like you press star 1 to whatever to do this. So when you press, you get that menu for USSD. I don't know USSD in full. Let me check it. Okay, USSD in full. Unrestricted supplementary service data. Okay, I didn't know it, but I knew what it meant. Okay, so in case you want to use this system that does not need internet, what you call USSD. So you can use USSD. So what you do, you write your program. It can be in Python, in PHP. You put on your server, and then you come and purchase a what? A USSD. So when someone will be clicking here on you'll be pressing USSD, this African's talking will be sending this code to your server and then send back this password. So what does it mean? It means that you can create an application that does not need anyone to use internet to use it using USSD. In fact, this guy who used mobile money, this is how he started. He created this application that you don't need an internet, or you don't need internet to do what? To use. So in case you want to also create your own mobile money, just come and program with internet and do everything, put on the server, and then come to Africa's Talking, come and read the USSD documentation, and then you can go ahead and deploy things like star whatever. So when someone press there, that request will come to your server, and then you can perform what you want and send back the response. So that is not today's main topic, but I'm giving you the ideas. In fact, this is how programmers get ideas. Once you know something that exists, then you can get the idea and think, hey, I can creatively use such a service to do a certain thing. But if you didn't know it, then you don't know it. So we have such a things. They're already there and they're waiting. So here the main point was showing you that you can use the sandboxes. And the sandboxes, they not affect anything and they're really free. So I have one more thing here called Clinic Master. Clinic Master is a popular system for managing clinics. And this is a system that was developed by Ugandans. Among the people who developed it is our own Dr. Drake. He's among the people who created the first code for this system called Clinic Master. It is used to what? To manage systems. Okay? So this Clinic Master, in case you want to deploy it, in case you want to use it or to request for it, what you do, you first request for the demo. So when you request for the demo here, you just provide your email, your name, and the phone number, and then submit and request these guys, okay? So these guys, they'll receive your request, and then they'll create for you a sandbox environment, okay? Or they'll create for you an environment that you can use to play with. So you'll play with that sandbox environment, but that data will not do anything to the real world. So after playing with it and make sure that you're okay with it, maybe you're interested, then you can go ahead and purchase the system. Okay? So they also have Sandbox. So as I said, the main purpose where we're learning this is we are going to real world. So when you're creating your mobile app, your applications in different scenarios, always consider if that application may need a sandbox. So I hope we've understood how sandboxes are implemented in real world. Okay? So security research. So another example of sandboxes. And information security profession use sandboxes for research or to detect malicious code. So in case you're working in security facility or in security departments, so what you do, they always use sandbox, or always use sandbox to detect if a software or a system is having malicious code or not. For instance, a security tool could visit a website to monitor that files that ultimately changed or could install and run a software. Windows Defender allow users to run antivirus softwares in a sandbox. So when you install a sandbox these days, when you install a software these days, Windows Defender can work as a sandbox for antivirus. So in case you are going to install antivirus into your computer, you can still use Windows Defender will be used to monitor that antivirus if it is really doing what it's supposed to do. I don't know whether if you have ever installed a software like Avast, even when you install it, Avast antivirus, okay? When you install it, Windows Defender itself, it will tell you how you have installed an antivirus and how your computer is maybe vulnerable. So what does it mean? It means that even though these guys know that we may need antiviruses, the people who created the Windows operating system, but they still know that these antiviruses, they need to be monitored if they're really doing what they're supposed to do. So what they did, they created a Windows Defender, which is available in Windows 10, to monitor if real antiviruses are doing what they're supposed to do. So it means that antivirus, they're also being monitored, and then in other words, they are running under a sandbox environment. So example of sandboxes, another example we have virtualization. I've already explained this. For example, a VM is basically, VM VirtualBox, what I've said, virtual machine is basically a type of a sandbox. This approach uses VM-based sandbox to contain and examine suspicious programs. So if you're suspecting a certain program, before you put it straight to your Windows operating system, what you do, you first install a VM or a virtual machine. As an example is a what? Is a virtual box. And for Windows, for Mac operating system, we said parallels, okay? We can also use it as a VM. So you first install a software on a VM or a virtual machine. And once you make sure it is working properly and it's not affecting anything on virtual machine, then you go ahead and put it in what? Into a real operating system. Otherwise, if it affects anything on virtual machine, then whatever it affects will remain with the what? Within the virtual machine. It will not affect the Windows operating system. It's just like when you're about to cross a river, what you do, you first get a stick and first test how deep that river is. Once you make sure that once the river is not really deep, then you can go ahead and cross. Otherwise, if it is so deep, what it will do, it will take a stick. If the river is kind of dangerous, it will take a stick, but it will not take you yourself. It is not good to test a river by you yourself. You try to cross it, then you see if it is really deep. But if it is deep, then it will take you. So likewise here, what if a software is malicious? Then it will affect our data or the data in production. So what we do, we first put those softwares into sandboxes. So sandbox applications include browser plugins. So I have browser plugins such as Microsoft Silverlight and Adobe Flash. So you remember, these days, these ones have become obsolete. Long ago, we used to have we may have a software that may need to use the operating system features. For example, we have a website that may need to use operating system features. For example, some website may need to use a Bluetooth, may need to know your location, may need to play a video, may need to play. Yet, the purpose of website is just to browse content, display images, and text. But these modern websites, we use them even to play games. And playing a game may need to control the light of your computer, may need to control different sensors or different features on your computer. So what do we do? But remember, it is just this is just a website. So what do we do? Long ago, we used to have what to call the Silverlight and Adobe Flash. So in case a web application or website wanted to do things like accessing your location or playing a video, you could first install that Adobe Flash. So that Adobe Flash could be kind of a virtual sandbox. A virtual operating system that can provide these more features like playing video and voice and everything to that operating system. To that browser, so it can perform or control more features in the operating system. So Microsoft Silverlight and Adobe Flash, these days they're obsolete. Modern browsers, you can even access location of someone without installing these extra plugins. But those plugins could work as an interface between the real operating system and the website or the web browser. And then they could work as sandboxes operating system for websites which needed extra features to control the operating system on where the browser is installed. But these days we no longer need those ones. Modern browsers like Google Chrome, they come with all capabilities installed. I've already explained this. So, and HTML5 has solved that problem. So sandboxes, PDFs, and document may include executable code. So Adobe Reader protected mode, it runs PDF files in a sandbox which stops the form escaping the PDF viewer and interfering with the rest of the computer. So Adobe PDF Reader is also an example of a sandbox. It can act as an operating system for a certain PDF. I don't know whether these days you've ever accessed a PDF that is having a form. Like within a PDF, you're able to write a form inside it and then submit. If you remember when we used to register these phone numbers, you remember those days when they said that everyone's phone number should be registered. If you remember, if you wanted to register yourself, you could download a PDF, but that PDF was having a form. Okay, so that form could validate. Even these days, last year when you could apply for NINI number or from URA, you could download a PDF, or it was an Excel file, and that Excel file, it was a Word file, but that Word file or PDF, it was having the fields with executable codes, and you could edit a PDF with a PDF could be kind of an application. You enter your information, they'll tell you whether your name is correct or not. They'll tell you whether your age, you've entered the wrong birth date and whatever. So the PDF could even validate your information. And it's just a PDF, but it was having a form feature. So after you submit using a what? Using a PDF. So if you didn't have an idea, just know today that you can create an application. You can create a PDF and it works as an application. So that PDF, someone can enter their names, somewhat and what, and then they list, and then they're able to do what? To submit to a certain URL using that particular PDF. So PDF that have those executable code that are validating fields and the rest, those PDF provide an environment that is extra to just viewing a PDF. And that environment that it provides, for example, executing a piece of JavaScript code or a piece of condition, that environment that is provided, it does not affect the real operating system because PDF is meant just for viewing. So since it's not affecting a real operating system, so it means it is also a sandbox. So you should know that browsers, they provide sandboxes because they execute pieces of code that do not affect operating system. PDF readers, they also provide sandboxes. Browser plugins like what? Like Microsoft Silverlight and Microsoft Silverlight and Adobe Flash, they also do what? They also provide sandbox. So as long as something is not going to affect our operating system, is what we call sandbox. So you have mobile applications, a generally executable platform in Sandbox. Apps for iOS and Windows are prohibited from doing many things on standard desktop applications. So did you know that also mobile apps, they are executed in form of what? In form of Sandbox, because they don't have all the rights to modify the operating system. Just let me give you an example. Have you ever wanted to do anything using a mobile application, something using mobile application, and then it gives you a prompt that you must give it a permission first? For example, accessing a location. When you want to access, when a mobile app that you've got from Google Play Store or from a certain Play Store, from certain store, App Store, if it wants to access your location, what does it do? The operating system first limits it, and then you have to first allow that application to do what? To access your location or not. For example, WhatsApp. A WhatsApp mobile app. When you want to record an audio, okay, guys, you can start giving your attendance. Please put your names and your IDs in the chat. We are about to finish the lecture. Please put your name and the ID in the chat, and that will work as your attendance. Okay? If you're really following. If you're not following, you've not had this. So please put your name and registration number in the chat, so it will work as attendance. So I was saying that, for example, WhatsApp, when you want to record an audio for the very first time on WhatsApp, what does it do? It asks you to allow WhatsApp to use a microphone. So what does it mean? It means that WhatsApp is running in a sandbox. If you don't allow it, it cannot affect your microphone or your external features. The external more features of the operating system. So you should know that mobile apps and Windows application, they also run in form of a a sandbox. For example, you're accessing user's location. You can see what I've explained already here. So accessing user's location, you have to first first ask for what? For permission. So that is what also a sandbox. So that makes it for today. And thank you for being part of today's lecture up to this point. Unless you have a question, otherwise I'll share the slides and the video and maybe other important links where you can learn more about what we've talked about today. So I will come one more question if there is one or any supplement from you in these remaining 3 minutes. You know, we're having 3 minutes remaining. So if there is anyone supplementing or asking or giving feedback, you can put it forward in 2 minutes and then we'll call it a day. Anyone who has anything to say? Yes, please.
We have not yet received those for the previous lecture.
Okay, I'm going to put them online today and I'll share with you. Yes. I'm going to upload the videos and the slides and I'll share with you through Dr. Drake. Anyone who has something to say in 2 minutes remaining? No comment?
How do you program the?
How do you program what?
Like, if you're using a sandbox, do you have like somewhere you write the code that will communicate with the sandbox?
Yes, yes, good question. When a sandbox is just it's just a term, it's a terminology. A sandbox is another copy of your source code that is not going to affect the copy that is being under the what? Production. So assume that you're creating an application that will allow people to register their names, okay? Register their names and their phone numbers. So what you do, you create two applications. You create one application. So one, and you copy that code into two. So one is for testing, another one is for real world deployment. So that one for testing is what we call a sandbox. It is just a terminology, but everything is just the same. It's just a terminology.
It is represented like an API.
Yes, it can be an API. Just know that it is a duplicate of what you're really doing. If you're creating, let us say that you're creating a car. So you have to create two cars. One that you're selling, another one that you're using for testing. If you're creating a mobile app, create one. One for testing, for users, for customers to use for testing, another one for implementation. Sandbox is just a terminology. I hope you've understood.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense now.
Yeah. It's just a duplicate. One for testing, another one for real world. We are remaining 1 minute. Any ladies, say something. If you have one. Any lady, you can open your microphone and say something in 1 minute and then we go. Gender balance.